Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we continue to deliberate the various developments here in Israel, throughout the region and beyond, it's always important to highlight how this war started. On October 7th, 209 days ago, the Islamist groups from the Hamas-plagued Gaza Strip launched an onslaught on southern Israel, declaring war by perpetrating a massacre, murdering 1,200 mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping 246 people, including elderly, men, women, children, and infants. 133 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. Let's now turn to our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, ongoing negotiations are taking place. Israel made far-reaching offer of concessions to the Islamist Hamas in return for a limited amount of hostages. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken concluded his visit in Israel with a list of demands. What can you tell us about all of this?
So, Jonathan, we are at the end of the first 30 weeks, the first 7 months of this war, which even if it is going to be paused, is still far from its very end. And we are at a turning point one way or the other. Now, the initiative has been given to Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas leader. If he decides to accept the deal which is on the table, we will go one way, the diplomatic route, with a ceasefire, with the release of Israeli and other hostages in exchange for the release of Palestinian prisoners, some of them in jail for committing not one murder, but multiple ones. However, if Sinwar answers in the negative, in order to keep terrorizing the Israeli public, which is anxious to see the hostages return, then the conflict might turn even more violent, with Israel sending its forces into the southern city of Rafah, the meeting point between Gaza and Egypt. Now, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who has been to Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel, is back in Washington. It is time for Israel right now to digest and decide, to digest what Blinken said behind closed doors. Not everything he said to Prime Minister Netanyahu and others was then reflected in the public announcements. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin also called his counterpart Yoav Gallant to repeat the same basic messages, and they are that the United States is committed to Israel's defense, but does not want it to undertake a major military operation in Rafah, not yet, because the administration is yet to see and approve a plan which will protect the 1.4 million Palestinian civilians in the Rafah area from being hurt by the clash between Israel and Hamas. And the entire American effort is now concentrated on bringing about the Hamas positive response. We will shortly know whether it's successful. In addition to that, there is the American, Saudi, Israeli tug of war regarding the normalization between Riyadh and Jerusalem, whether it will start shortly, whether it should include any recognition of a future Palestinian state, or only some vague announcement, declaration by Israel that it does not see this possibility as a non-starter, giving some possibility for that to happen. So all that and the ramifications of what will happen in Gaza for the Lebanese Front we are in a period where Israel is about to mark its Holocaust Remembrance Day, and almost immediately after that, the Memorial Day and Independence Day, very solemn days in the Israeli annual calendar, and hopefully a hostage release will take place between these fateful days.
Let's turn now to our next panelist, who will hopefully clarify a couple of matters to me. Formerly a Mossad division chief, namely the intelligence directorate of Mossad, and part of the senior branches of the IDF military intelligence, but retired Brigadier General Dr. Amnon Sofri, and it's good to see you, General. I'm trying to make sense of what the Americans are sending over to Jerusalem at this point in time. On the one hand, as Mr. Oren mentioned, they openly and vocally support Israel. They send military support and other types of support to ensure the security of Israel from foreign adversaries. But at the same time, the leverage that Israel has over the Islamist Hamas in the Gaza Strip at this moment is to eradicate its remaining 4 battalions in Rafah and its remaining governing capabilities to ensure that it will not return in force in the medium to long term. Of course, everything can happen, but nonetheless, the Rafah operation from a military perspective is vital. What am I missing here, particularly now when there are negotiations? Why would Hamas say yes?
First of all, as you said, Jonathan, it's right. The picture is very complicated, and there are some dimensions. The first one is what Israel does it really aim for? The fact that we will go into Rafah and eradicate all these 4 battalions of Hamas and ruin everything that we can find out, and maybe even succeed in getting some of our abducted people back home, hopefully. What will be the next day? What is going to be the situation in Gaza afterwards? Who is going to rule Gaza? As long as you don't have any other entity agreed upon Israel, and of course agreed and accepted by the US and the other moderate Sunni countries, there's no one else to rule Gaza, and as long as we don't find any substitute, Hamas still controls Gaza. Look what happened in the area in the northern area of Gaza, in the area of Han Yunis, in the area of all the central camps. Hamas is actually ruling all these areas, and that means that if you don't find any other way to get control upon this area, the IDF will be forced to go back to what used to be before we left Gaza in 2005, and to control Gaza fully control Gaza, militarily and on the civilian side. And it's not recommended. Let's say. Second, the fact that the US is supporting us is very, very nice, but the US has other interests as well. They are supporting the people in Gaza. They have to prove to the Arab world, and of course to their people at home, that they are humanitarian, and they lead the humanitarian effort to assist all the people in Gaza on top of the Israeli head, without asking Israel, without consulting Israel. They decided to do so, and they implement it. Now, another thing is that they try to put great restriction upon us on this operation at Gaza. Mr. Blinken came here for several reasons, but one of them was to inspect our preparations to get into Rafah. And he said that he is not very, very pleased with what he saw for the plans. And that means that they have some leverage upon the Israeli government to say you are not going to go into Rafah anyhow. That's not the situation. And then he was asked and interviewed by NBC. He said, people tend to say some things. That means he implying that don't really take it seriously what the Prime Minister Netanyahu is telling the media, because we have the leverage upon Israel.
This is, well, quite dramatic to have an ally come and say something like this. But let's turn now to the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense, namely Brigadier General in Reserve Doron Gavish. General Gavish, it's good to see you. I'd like to immediately dive into a complex issue, which we just talked about, but you're in uniform, so of course you'll be more diplomatic than we are. When the top diplomat of the greatest ally of the state of Israel comes and basically says he's not pleased with what he sees with regard to preparations, irrespective of the far-reaching success that the IDF has showcased in preserving non-combatant lives and conducting itself in the most highest standards of military combat and establishing new precedents that Western militaries will have to try and live up to in their next conflicts once they're forced to contend with foreign enemies seeking to challenge whatever national security interests they may see as infringed. What goes through your mind as a soldier, as an officer, as a man who has dedicated most of his life to the protection of his people?
Well, Jonathan, the advantage of being in reserve and being old in a way is that we know what we need to concentrate in. And as a military personnel, we really concentrate in what we need to do in our job, in the results of our job. And, there are many things that are being said from all sides all the time. But at least from the military point of view, I think that we have to be focused on our mission, which is defend the people of Israel, to defend our country, to do it in the best way, and to gain the goals of this war. So this is really what we are concentrated, and not in other things. There are many, as I said before, there are all kinds of things that are being said, but we are focused. I would like that, maybe to refer to something that you opened with, that we are waiting to the Palestinians, to the Hamas answer, and so on. We have a saying, unfortunate saying, that the Palestinians never missed an opportunity that they could miss. And this is another opportunity that I think is on the table now. We always talk about it, that war is not only about the military part of it. There are much more things that need to be concentrated and to take in consideration, I mean. And, probably what is on the table now, it is much more wider than the military issue. So we are waiting, but then from the other side, of course, we should say that the Israeli military is prepared for everything. And all the options are open, and whatever would be decided, the IDF is preparing himself to carry out. And this is what is important, at least from a military point of view.
Mr. Oren, I'd like to expand on one ingredient that seems to be very problematic, and that is disinformation, misinformation promoted by Russia, promoted by China, promoted by the Islamic Republic of Iran, among others, a long list of others, including Qatar, whose Al Jazeera network was a point in question today when deliberations are taking place in Jerusalem on whether or not to ban this mouthpiece of both Qatar, but also of the Muslim Brotherhood and those who seek to alter the way in which Israel is viewed around the world. It seems like the campuses throughout the United States, Europe, what we're seeing now, are also prone to this type of disinformation utilized by those kind of countries. And it seems like even now the various officials, including the mayor of New York and others, are coming out and saying many of those on the campuses are not students. They happen to be outside people, of course, agitators referred to as people who have their own interests to basically create chaos on various campuses as part, again, of this disinformation campaign promoted and funded by totalitarian regimes.
So the point about the demonstrations being on campuses would seem to be secondary. It is not really important whether these demonstrations were on Broadway or Fifth Avenue or on 116th Street between the Columbia campus and Harlem and or who knows where. This only has to do with the decision of university authorities to call in law enforcement forces, because usually university college campuses are off limits to police officers, and it has to do with the decision of the host administrators to go on about it. But we are sitting here many thousands of miles away from what is happening from New York to Los Angeles. And we look at what is happening and wonder, do these 18 to 22-year-olds even know what they are talking about? Not only regarding what is happening on the ground and the background to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict or the Muslim-Jewish conflict, but also the way some of them have portrayed their own condition once they were barricaded inside the university. Just like that spokesperson for students at Columbia University who demanded that food be brought in because it is humanitarian aid, just like Gaza. So it would seem to be, in some cases, of course, some of them may be sincere, but others are simply spoiled brats who have no idea what they are talking about. They are supporting the most extreme and murderous elements in the Palestinian society or in Muslim circles when they were supposed to support the other side, the moderate elements in both the Palestinian and Israeli societies. And this one may bet, of course, some bets do not turn out the way they are perceived now. This will die down in a few weeks' time.
Well, all those campuses are one flight away. That's how I see it. And ultimately, there is a significance, from my perspective at least, that it's on campuses because these are supposedly the future leaders in the Western world, future clerks that are going to influence foreign policy and domestic policy, and are currently, according to a number of polls and studies, the main news source that they have been prone to for young people under the age of 30, happens to be TikTok and other types of social media, which are prone to moderation and policy diktats, which ultimately are coming from narrative-driven sources and different countries that, again, such as TikTok, there is a reason why it had to be blocked by Congress, and thankfully it was signed into law by President Biden.
You mean they don't watch TV7 Israel news?
Well, some do, according to our own data, thankfully, but the majority, as you know, all jokes aside, the majority are prone to disinformation on a regular basis, and therefore I'm not surprised to see these uninformed youngsters running around thinking that they're doing something other than being, plaguing their own countries with poison. But General Sofrin, I think there are more important issues to contend with right now, such as the Lebanese Front. There is ongoing discussions. There are ongoing discussions behind the scenes, of course, with regard to an American proposal being pushed forward about potentially reaching some kind of an arrangement, and the Americans are now stressing to Israel to accept the operational successes it achieved thus far, talking about implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701 as unviable.
It's not only the Americans, but also the French. The French Minister of Foreign Affairs visited Beirut just this week. He met with the chairman of the parliament, Tamir Berry. He handed him the proposal of France for a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, not Hezbollah, Lebanon, the government of Lebanon, even though it's almost not functioning. And they invited both delegations from Israel and from Lebanon to Paris to negotiate there over this agreement to get to a ceasefire between Israel and between Lebanon. I don't give it much chance, because even though if the government of Lebanon or somebody else will apply to this French proposal or American proposal, it doesn't have any power upon Hezbollah. Hezbollah claims all the time that even if some agreement will be reached, until the fire in Gaza will not cease, they will go on fighting. Now, if, for example, there's going to be now some agreement between Israel and Hamas, of course, through the brokering countries, meaning Egypt and the US, and there will be a ceasefire for about 6 weeks or something like that, the fighting at the northern border will cease, as it happened on about 4 months ago or something like that, when we had the first phase of of releasing our people that were abducted to Gaza. Now, Hezbollah is obliged to go on fighting as long as the fighting in Gaza goes on, and of course with the encouragement coming out from Iran. And that's what stopped the fighting. The fighting will stop only when Hezbollah will decide that it will stop fighting, and maybe they will give some agreement to the government of Lebanon to handle some negotiations with Israel over the next phase. But of course, it will be connected immediately to arrangements along the border, all the 13 points that are in dispute between Israel and Lebanon. At least that's what they claim. And Israel signaled that it is willing to negotiate upon these issues. So that may bring some agreement into Lebanon.
2 points on Lebanon before I'd like to hear, of course, General Gavish, who used to be also the head of the Israeli defense delegation in Paris, is the EU Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, also visited Beirut, during which she pledged 1 billion euros to the Lebanese government, which is deeply corrupted from the bottom up, and has been signaled by the IMF and World Bank or asked to reform heftily before receiving foreign support. But somehow the European Union doesn't seem to care that this country is so heavily corrupt at this point, and is willing to send this substantive amount of money of European taxpayers' money, if I may highlight, to the caretaker government to try and employ various activities in a country that is unfortunately devastated by the foreign activities of the Islamic Republic of Iran. General Gavish, on the Lebanese front, how do you see the current situation, and what does the IDF need to do in order to change the balance and basically force Hezbollah's forces or operatives north of the Litani River?
Well, you're right, Jonathan. Today we have only easy questions, and this is another complicated one, of course. What should be done? I think that the diplomatical sides of it was discussed. I have nothing further to add on this. From the military point of view, basically what is expected is that the Hamas operatives won't be deployed to the south part of the Lebanese border, very close to the Israeli border. We have to remember that what they are doing there, it's not only being and walking around or something like this. They are occupying houses. They are putting their rockets, all kind of civilian infrastructure that they are using for their own intelligence needs, operational needs, tunnels that we know that some of them have been built and revealed few years ago. We know this is an activity that it is still going on. So basically, the Hezbollah is using the south part of Lebanon as a military zone, and no one is going to be surprised if what we've seen in the Gaza Strip exactly the same would be seen in the Hezbollah front in South Lebanon, and we have to say even much more than this, because the Hezbollah is a strong power, is a strong military. We could compare Hezbollah to probably it would be one of the largest military forces within Europe if Hezbollah was in Europe. So this is how it looks in the South Lebanon. So from the Israel point of view, there is no question that only redeployment of the Hezbollah, at least until the Litani line, this is what is expected. And when we are talking about military option, the military option is basically to do, kind of copy-paste what we've seen in Gaza, and to do the same in the south part of Lebanon. No one wants it. No one wants the results that we see in Gaza, also in the South Lebanon, but if the Hezbollah would bring us to this point, unfortunately, this is probably what we would see also in South Lebanon.
Before we conclude, and I'd like the last sentence to be of Mr. Oren, I think it's important to highlight that Hamas in Gaza, alongside Palestinian Islamic Jihad and other terror affiliates, Hezbollah, the various Shiite militias operating in Syria, Iraq, Hashd al-Shabi, Ansar Allah, or the Houthis in Yemen, all these are interconnected and all are activated, funded, facilitated by the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is the chief culprit here, which is supported by China, supported by Russia at this point as well. And we need to keep this in mind and highlight this also to our dear American allies who seem to shy away from strategic power competition at a time when they won't be able to hide from it anytime soon, because since January of 2021, this has been brought up, highlighted to the Americans by their Chinese counterparts, and it will continue for many years to come, unfortunately. Mr. Oren, last sentence is yours.
Regarding Lebanon, it's quite distressing to see the same faces, the same names we have known since at least 1982. Samir Jaja of the Lebanese forces, Walid Jumblat of the Druze, Nabi Berri of the Shiites, even Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah has been in power for 32 years. Time for new names and new ideas.
Well, if only we could choose them. This is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank General Sofrin, General Kavish, and Mr. Oren. Thank you for your insights, and I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next update from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.